Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. This is another match that I managed to win while competing in my first online chess.com tournament. It's still round one of the lower rated Aussies 2021 Christmas Challenge. In this game, I managed to win starting with my favourite gambit within my favourite opening system, the Vienna Gambit in the Vienna Game. This gave me a good lead from the beginning and led to a fun and dynamic game. I actually lost the advantage a couple of times, but luckily my opponent didn't punish me for my inaccurate play. Please enjoy! Rightio, so this is another game in round one of the lower rated Aussies 2012 Christmas Challenge. And again, my opponent was slightly rated above me on the daily game format. Now, in this game, I played white, opponent black, and if we have a quick look at the review in the algorithm, I played okay, I suppose, with an accuracy around 70%, so pretty happy with that. Had a reasonably good lead throughout, a couple of inaccuracies where I basically lose most of my advantage, but luckily got that back. And we both had sort of a mix of good moves, some inaccuracies, probably more inaccuracies with my opponent. And my opponent also did a couple of blunders, which probably was what made the biggest difference for them in this game. Now, in the analysis, I started at e4, opponent played e5, knight c3, so that's the beginning of the Vienna game. Opponent played knight f6, and so we now have the Vienna Gambit with f4. And with the Vienna Gambit, the invitation here is for the opponent to capture that gambited pawn. And if they do that, then we now have e5, and this forces the knight to undevelop to go back to g8. And in fact, that is the best move for black in that position. And the reason for that is all the possible escape squares for the black knight is defended by white. So white wins potentially quite a lot of tempo. Now, the opponent here knew enough to not accept the gambit, so declined the gambit by playing knight c6, developing their other knight. However, that is a mistake, as you can see from the evaluation, almost +2. And the reason for that is that that gambited pawn is an aggressor in its own right. It can go straight to capture the e5 pawn, and that's what I do. In this position, it looks like the logical move for black is to capture the pawn, and that is the best move. But now I take control of the full center with d4, again attacking that knight. Now that knight has one of two squares it can go. It doesn't really matter either one. Now, maybe slightly better on knight to g6, but pretty equal in evaluation. And the problem for black is that the whole issue with the original plan just occurs again, except in this situation I haven't even lost a pawn. So again, that knight cannot really go to any of these squares as they're defended, and so the best move is undeveloping the knight back to g8. So this is the best version almost of the Vienna Gambit, where the opponent attempts to decline a gambit as I basically get the position that I want without even losing a pawn. Develop my knight to f3. Important in my view to try to not suffer a potential queen to h4 with check. And that basically stops that from happening. Opponent plays d6. I now develop bishop b5. So b5 and c4 are both possibilities, but this sort of pins the knight to the king, again allowing me to win some tempo, and also effectively not disallowing the two attackers on my pawn on e5. Opponent plays bishop d7. I now develop my bishop to f4, giving an extra defender. Stockfish reckons short castles was the better move here. Opponent plays knight to ge7, so developing the other knight. I now capture with pawn, captures back. I now capture back with bishop, and apparently that was not the best move. Recommendation here was to, in fact, develop the queen and lining things up on the e file with the king. Opponent plays a6 to ask the question, what am I going to do with that bishop? And I chose to bring the bishop back to c4 in this instance. And there is some logic of potentially only having played c4 originally with the bishop. Opponent tries to move their knight out of the way, and also now with an attack on the bishop. Now, Stockfish thinks just to take here, and I suppose that makes sense. It means that the opponent loses the right to castle on the king side. I thought that maybe I could keep the bishop here, so that sort of forces the opponent to block, because that's the only way they can prevent check. I thought that they might do it with one of the knights or maybe the bishop, but in any case, it stops that bishop to bishop attack. The opponent plays bishop e7, which was apparently a good move. Again, Stockfish thinks just capturing is good. In this case, I thought maybe I wanted to keep the tensions. I retreated my bishop all the way to a3. So I'm still got an advantage here, but, losing that advantage. Opponent short castles. I decide to long castles in this situation, so making things a little bit spicy. Opponent plays bishop g4, which was apparently a very substantial blunder. And I should mention the long castles was apparently a mistake. I basically lost my entire advantage doing that. And I get almost all the advantage back with that bishop move. Simply because I can now either kick the bishop out or ask the opponent to commit to capturing that knight, and I wasn't too unhappy with them capturing my knight. I didn't have a huge problem with that, to be honest. Push forward, sort of my pawn to d5, so taking potentially sort of taking away sort of the two attackers on that pawn, and also now that pawn is defended by the bishop and the knight, so that's looking like a better position. Still looking pretty good. So again, the opponent, the computer thinks in this position, bishop captures bishop is best. I have to admit, I couldn't quite see why that was the case with so many defenders on the e7 square. Opponent now opts to capture, and so potentially wasted some bishop moves doing that. I captured back with queen. Now I didn't want to sort of break apart these two pawns. Potentially I thought maybe these could be advanced, so I decided to keep them together. Opponent now captures that piece captures the bishop, sorry, with their bishop. And here I thought if I capture back with pawn, I'm creating a weakness on the defense of the king. So I opted not to do that at this time, but rather now potentially pushing this pawn forward and creating threat. So once I captured there, potentially a second move there, it's sort of potentially is a more forcing move, I thought. And Stockfish thought that was the best move as well. Opponent now brings queen to the b file, obviously with sort of that attack. So potentially sort of a mate threat there. And here I saw a sneaky move. It's interesting that Stockfish didn't think this was the best move. They thought just straight out capturing the bishop was best. But here I thought there's a threat on the queen, also defending the b2 square, basically preventing a mating attack. And the other thing that this did, which I think my opponent didn't see, is now I've opened up the whole rank. So there is now an extra attack on that bishop with the queen, and I wondered whether or not the opponent would see that and instead simply move their queen out of the way. And that's actually what they did. They just moved their queen out of the way, allowing me to straight up capture that bishop, which was hanging. And at this point, I was pretty sure that as long as I didn't blunder myself, I should be winning. So fairly up on material. I thought my position was pretty good. I've got a pawn all the way up to sort of the sixth rank. I thought things were looking pretty good. Here I decided to block with knight. The sort of opponent, the computer thought that just moving the king out of the way was better here. They bring their rook to the picture with rook d8, and obviously now potentially a serious problem with sort of two attackers on that rook. But I could just bolster that. The defense of that rook with my rook of my own, my second rook, so rook to d1. And I am very, very happy to potentially force a trade in this position. And that's that's what it does. It forces a trade. So captures. Again, I'm feeling it's easier for me to play here. I have more pieces than the opponent, and the fewer pieces I have, the better my chances. They bring their knight out, realizing that they need to develop their knight. However, long diagonals, straight out hung that knight, and yeah, very, very sure that I was winning here, though, never too late to hang back rank mate. All those things need to be thought of. I actually need to convert. They capture, which makes sense. Capture back. Opponent now tries to bring their other rook into the picture. Again, two attackers. However, in this case, I could simply block with that bishop, which is what I did. I think the opponent here wasn't sure what to do, so just pushed a pawn, and by pushing that pawn, they've potentially weakened the defense around that king. I bring my knight out, seeing a potential fork of those two pieces, and I was pretty sure if I could pull that off, that would be the end of the game. The opponent opted to, I wasn't entirely sure why they made that move, because it actually didn't resolve this issue here that that these two pieces are still forked. So I made the move. I think the opponent realized their error and resigned at this point. We had a little bit of a chat afterwards. Very nice chap, fellow Aussie. So good game, GG. One of the things that I've learned while playing the Vienna is that many opponents at the beginner intermediate level are not familiar with the opening, and that this can result in some advantageous positions when I'm playing white. However, in positions after the Vienna Gambit where white is playing very aggressively and potentially overextended, it is easy, at least for me, to play inaccurately and lose that advantage very quickly. The learnings I took from this game is that I need to probably study the Vienna game in more depth. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.